Zarathek had lived for 300 cycles, seen the rise and fall of 17 civilizations, and witnessed the birth of 2 stars. As a chronicler of the galactic consensus, she believed she had cataloged every form of warfare, every species fighting spirit, and every tactical doctrine worth noting. The crystalline data cores in her ship contained the military histories of 4,000 races, each one meticulously analyzed and categorized. She was wrong about everything. The distress signal came from the outer rim of the Helix Nebula, a region so remote that most civilized species had never bothered to explore it. The transmission was crude, lacking the sophisticated quantum encryption that marked advanced civilizations. It was barely more than electromagnetic noise shaped into basic mathematical sequences, the universal language of intelligence seeking help. Another primitive species discovering fire. Her research partner Kelvix had muttered, his 6 eyes rolling in practiced boredom. The insectoid scholar had grown tired of cataloging the endless parade of species that barely understood metallurgy, let alone space travel. Probably discovered their planet's core is unstable or some asteroid is headed their way. But something about the signal bothered Zarathek. The mathematical progression wasn't just a call for help. It was structured, deliberate, almost like a warning. After 3 days of debate with the Consensus Council, she received permission to investigate. It would be a routine first contact mission, or so she thought. The journey to the 3rd planet of a yellow dwarf star took 6 standard weeks. The world appeared unremarkable on initial scans, mostly water, with large landmasses covered in green vegetation and swirling white atmospheric patterns. The inhabitants had achieved basic atomic theory and primitive space flight, but nothing that suggested they posed any threat to themselves or others. Then, the Devourers arrived. Zarathek was conducting atmospheric readings when her ship's proximity alarms screamed to life. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she watched in horror as 12 massive bioships materialized from dimensional fold space. Each vessel was over 3 kilometers long, their chitinous hulls bristling with weapon pods that glowed with malevolent energy. The Devourers. She had read about them in the most classified sections of the Consensus archives, accounts so terrifying that many historians refused to believe them. A nomadic species that consumed entire worlds, stripping them of all biological matter before moving on to the next system. They had been dormant for nearly 1,000 years, and the Consensus had hoped they were extinct. By the 7 moons of Xeris, Kelvix whispered, his antennae trembling. We need to leave. Now, alert the Consensus fleet. But Zarathek couldn't move. She watched, transfixed, as the first Devourer ship descended toward the planet's surface. The humans below had detected them. Their primitive sensor networks were lighting up across their planet's night side. But what could they possibly do? Their most advanced weapons were chemical rockets with fusion warheads. Against the Devourer's bioarmor and regenerative hulls, they might as well throw rocks. The first human city died in minutes. The Devourer ship hovered over what the humans called New York, extending feeding tendrils that wrapped around the towering structures like a spider embracing its prey. Millions of humans fled in panic as their greatest metropolis was consumed, the very matter of its buildings and inhabitants absorbed into the alien ship's digestive chambers. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of cowering or surrendering as every other species had done when faced with the Devourers, the humans began to fight back. Not just with their military, but with everyone. Civilians turned their vehicles into improvised weapons, ramming them into the feeding tendrils. Scientists worked around the clock to analyze the alien biomatter and find weaknesses. Children helped their parents build barricades from furniture and debris. Zarathek watched through her ship's enhanced sensors as a human military commander named Sarah Chun coordinated the defense of a coastal city. The woman's voice crackled across radio frequencies as she directed fighter jets, ground forces, and even fishing boats retrofitted with torpedoes. When a Devourer tentacle erupted from the ocean floor near her command bunker, Chun grabbed a portable missile launcher and fired it personally before resuming her tactical coordination. They're insane, Kelvix chittered, his compound eyes reflecting the explosions on the planet below. Don't they understand? The Devourers have consumed 47 worlds. Civilizations far more advanced than theirs have fallen in days. But the humans didn't stop. When their conventional weapons proved insufficient, they adapted with frightening speed. Scientists discovered that the Devourer's bioarmor was vulnerable to certain radio frequencies. Within hours, Every human radio station on the planet had been converted into a weapon, broadcasting coordinated electromagnetic pulses that caused the alien ships to writhe in apparent pain. A young human engineer named Marcus Rodriguez figured out how to overload their fusion power plants to create localized electromagnetic storms. Instead of evacuating when his plant was targeted by a Devourer ship, he stayed at his post, manually triggering an overload that sent a surge of energy through the alien vessel's nervous system. The ship crashed into the Pacific Ocean, but Rodriguez died in the explosion. He was one of thousands who made similar choices. Zarathek documented it all, her crystalline memory cores recording every act of defiance, every innovation born from desperation, every moment when a human chose to fight rather than flee. She watched a grandmother in rural China use her knowledge of agriculture to develop biological weapons from common farming chemicals. She recorded teenagers in Brazil who converted their racing drones into miniature missile platforms. She documented a group of astronomers in Chile who figured out how to use their radio telescopes as focused energy weapons. The humans were losing, their casualties numbered in the tens of millions, but they refused to surrender. More disturbing to Zarathek was how quickly they learned. Within days of first contact with Devourer technology, human engineers were reverse engineering captured biomatter. They turned the aliens' own regenerative properties against them, creating viruses that would cause the bioships to consume themselves. On the 7th day of the invasion, everything changed. The humans had been quietly evacuating their major population centers, but not to flee. They were concentrating their forces for something the consensus had never seen before, a coordinated global counterattack. Every human military unit, every retrofitted civilian vessel, every improvised weapon platform attacked simultaneously. The assault began in the pre-dawn hours of what humans called Tuesday. From hidden bunkers and mobile launchers, thousands of modified nuclear missiles erupted skyward. But these weren't the crude fusion weapons the Devourers expected. Human scientists had worked without sleep for 6 days, incorporating alien biomatter into their warheads, creating hybrid weapons that could penetrate the invaders' organic armor. Zarathek watched a Devourer command ship, one that had consumed 3 entire cities, suddenly convulse as human bioweapons ate through its hull from the inside. The massive vessel crashed into what had once been the ruins of London, its death throes creating seismic tremors that registered on sensors halfway around the planet. But the most shocking moment came when the humans turned their own planet into a weapon. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a theoretical physicist from Mexico City, had been working with a team of international scientists on something they called the Resonance Project. Using the planet's own magnetic field as a conductor, they turned Earth itself into a massive electromagnetic pulse generator. The energy discharge was visible from Zarathek's ship, a brilliant blue aurora that engulfed the entire planet. Every Devourer ship in orbit was instantly crippled, their bioelectrical systems overloaded by the planetary pulse. But the humans weren't finished. As the alien vessels fell from the sky, human forces were waiting with weapons they had built from salvaged Devourer technology. Biocannons that fired the invaders' own acidic compounds. Regenerative armor that adapted to incoming attacks. Weapons that should have taken decades to develop, created in days through sheer desperation and ingenuity. The last Devourer ship fell on the 9th day. Its massive biohull crashed into the Australian outback, creating a crater that would be visible for centuries. Human soldiers, many of them wounded and exhausted, surrounded the dying vessel and pumped it full of their hybrid bioweapons until it finally stopped moving. Silence fell across the planet. Zarathek realized she had been holding her breath for the past several minutes. Beside her, Kelvix was making small clicking noises, his species' equivalent of shocked speechlessness. They had just witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare, about survival, about the limits of what a species could accomplish when faced with extinction. How? Kelvix finally managed to whisper. How did they do that? The Devourers have consumed civilizations that had mastered gravity manipulation, species that could bend space-time itself. How did these primitives? But Zarathek was beginning to understand. As she reviewed the recorded data, she saw patterns that other species had missed because they had never looked for them. The humans hadn't won through superior technology or ancient knowledge. They had won through something far more dangerous, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Every other species, when faced with the Devourers, had followed logical protocols. They had evacuated their populations, preserved their cultural artifacts, and tried to negotiate or flee. They had accepted that some battles couldn't be won, that survival sometimes required strategic retreat. The humans had rejected that logic entirely. When their weapons proved insufficient, they made new ones. When their cities were consumed, they used the destruction as tactical intelligence. When their people died, they turned their sacrifice into motivation for innovation. They had treated the invasion not as an extinction event, but as a problem to be solved, no matter the cost. As Zarathek watched the humans begin cleaning up their ravaged world, she noticed something else that chilled her to her crystalline core. They weren't celebrating their victory. They were studying the wreckage, analyzing every piece of Devourer technology they could recover. They were learning. A transmission reached her ship, a basic radio signal in broken but functional galactic standard. A human voice, speaking carefully, unknown vessel in orbit. This is Colonel Sarachon of United Earth Defense. Your ship has been monitored since before the invasion. We appreciate that you did not interfere, but we would like to speak with you. Zarathek exchanged a glance with Kelvix. The humans had known they were there the entire time. They had fought their desperate battle while knowing that advanced aliens were watching, and they had still refused to ask for help. We're receiving another transmission, Kelvix reported, his voice carefully neutral. It's not from the planet. The message came through on quantum channels that required technology the humans shouldn't have possessed for another 1,000 years. But there it was, clear and unmistakable. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the Human Science Consortium. We've been monitoring your observation protocols and would like to establish formal communications. We have questions about galactic civilization, and we believe you'll want to hear what we've learned about Devourer technology. Dr. Vasquez's next words sent ice through Zarathek's veins. We've discovered that the Devourers aren't extinct. The ships that attacked us were just scouts. According to the biodata we've extracted from their remains, there's a much larger fleet in deep space, headed for the galactic core. We estimate they'll reach the first consensus worlds in approximately 18 months. The transmission paused, and when it resumed, there was something in the human's voice that Zarathek had never heard before from a pre-spaceflight species. Confidence. We think we can help. As Zarathek stared down at the blue and white world below, at the species that had just done the impossible, she finally understood why she had felt compelled to investigate their primitive distress signal. It hadn't been a call for help. It had been a warning. And now, as she prepared to break every consensus protocol and make contact with these impossible humans, Zarathek realized that the galaxy was about to learn something new about warfare. The Devourers had awakened something that had been sleeping in this remote corner of space, something that didn't know how to surrender. The humans called themselves Earthborn, and they were about to teach the universe a lesson that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The heavens had good reason to tremble. The Consensus Council chamber on Zirion Prime had not seen such chaos in 800 years. Representatives from 43 species filled the vast crystalline amphitheater, their various forms creating a tapestry of evolutionary diversity. Some floated in gravitational fields, others communicated through bioluminescent patterns, and a few existed as pure energy contained within specialized projection units. But, despite their differences, they all shared one thing: complete shock at what Zarathek had just shown them. The holographic display in the center of the chamber continued its loop, showing human forces destroying Devourer ships with weapons they had invented during the battle itself. Council members watched in stunned silence as a human child helped her father load bioammunition into a gun that had been a farming tool just days earlier. They saw scientists working in laboratories while explosions shook the ground above them, their calculations leading to weapons that defied conventional understanding of physics. This is impossible, declared Vorthake, the Council's senior military advisor. His crystalline form pulsed with agitated red light. We have documented every encounter with the Devourers across 17 sectors. No species has ever successfully repelled them. Most fall within hours of first contact. Kelvix, still trembling from what he had witnessed, activated his translation matrix. Honored council members, I understand your skepticism. I felt the same way. But we observed this directly. The humans didn't just survive the Devourer assault. They reversed engineered alien biotechnology in real time and turned it against their attackers. High Counselor Shuren, ancient even by consensus standards, raised one of her 6 primary appendages. The chamber fell silent. Chronicler Zarathek, you mentioned that these humans predicted additional Devourer forces. Explain. Zarathek activated her memory core interface, and new holographic data materialized above the council floor. According to the bioneural networks they extracted from destroyed Devourer vessels, the attack on Earth was reconnaissance. A hunting pack sent to test the humans' defensive capabilities before the main swarm arrived. The data painted a terrifying picture. Deep space monitoring stations had detected gravitational anomalies consistent with massive fleet movements in the void between galaxies. The main Devourer swarm, dormant for centuries in the darkness beyond known space, was awakening. Preliminary estimates suggested a force numbering in the thousands of bioships, each one larger than the scouts that had attacked Earth. Their trajectory leads directly through consensus space, Zarathek continued. They'll reach the outer colonies within standard cycles. Based on historical patterns, they'll consume everything in their path until they reach the galactic core. Panic rippled through the chamber. Representatives began urgent communications with their home worlds, while others demanded immediate military consultation. The consensus fleet, impressive as it was, had never faced anything like the Devourer swarm. Their weapons were designed for conflicts between civilized species, not against an alien plague that could adapt and evolve in response to any attack. "We must begin immediate evacuation protocols," announced General Kirikson, commander of the Consensus 4th Battle Group. His insectoid form clicked nervously as he spoke. "Pull back all civilian populations to core worlds, establish defensive perimeters around essential systems, and prepare for strategic withdrawal if necessary." "No." The voice came from the chamber's communication array, transmitted from the remote monitoring station where Zarathek had left her ship. But it wasn't her voice speaking. The translation matrix identified the speaker as Colonel Sarah Chun, the human military commander who had coordinated Earth's defense. "I'm sorry for interrupting your proceedings," the human continued, her words carefully pronounced in galactic standard. "But we've been monitoring your discussions through the communication link Chronicler Zarathek established. We believe evacuation would be exactly the wrong strategy." The chamber erupted in outrage. The idea that a pre-spaceflight species would presume to offer military advice to the consensus was unprecedented. Several representatives demanded the communication link be severed immediately. High Counselor Furin raised her appendages again, and silence returned. "Explain your reasoning, Colonel Chun." "The Devourers are pursuing a standard consumption pattern," Chun replied. "They rely on their enemies following logical defensive protocols, evacuating populations, falling back to defensive positions, trying to preserve their civilizations. But that plays directly into their strategy. They want you to concentrate your populations. It makes the feeding process more efficient." Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice joined the transmission. "We've completed our analysis of the Devourer bioneural networks. They're not just mindless predators. They're intelligent hunters who have perfected their techniques across thousands of worlds. Every defensive strategy your people are considering has been tried before and failed." Zarathek watched the council members exchange uncertain glances. The humans were challenging fundamental assumptions about warfare that had guided consensus doctrine for millennia. "Then, what do you suggest?" asked General Kirikson, his tone suggesting he thought the question was ridiculous. "We suggest you let us help you fight," Chen replied simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Representatives who communicated through subsonic frequencies stopped their vibrations. Energy beings dimmed to barely visible levels. Even the chamber's environmental systems seemed to pause. "You want to fight alongside us," Vorthike finally said, his crystalline form flickering between colors. "Your species has barely achieved orbital flight, and you want to engage in interstellar warfare against an enemy that has consumed advanced civilizations." "Yes," Chen replied without hesitation, "because we've already beaten them once, and we learned something important in the process. The Devourers aren't invincible. They're just very good at fighting civilized species who follow predictable patterns." Dr. Vasquez's voice returned to the transmission. "During our analysis of their bioships, we discovered something your archives missed. The Devourers have evolved to counter every type of technology and tactical doctrine they've encountered. Energy weapons, projectile systems, defensive barriers, they've adapted to all of it. But they've never encountered chaotic innovation." "Chaotic innovation?" High Counselor Zicharan asked. "The ability to create completely new solutions under extreme pressure," Vasquez explained. "Most advanced civilizations develop along predictable technological paths. When faced with an overwhelming threat, they apply their existing knowledge more efficiently. Humans do something different. We abandon everything we know and start over." Zarathek found herself nodding, remembering the impossible speed with which the humans had adapted during the invasion. They had thrown out their entire military doctrine within hours and rebuilt it from scratch using alien technology they barely understood. You're asking us to trust our civilization's survival to a species we've known for less than one standard cycle, General Kirikson protested. A species that doesn't even possess faster-than-light travel. Actually, Chen replied, and there was something in her voice that made Zarathek's skin crawl. We solved that problem 3 days ago. The council chamber fell silent again. Faster-than-light travel was considered one of the fundamental benchmarks of advanced civilization. Most species took centuries to develop the mathematical frameworks necessary for manipulating space-time. The humans had apparently figured it out in less than a week. We adapted devourer biodrives, Dr. Vasquez explained. Their organic technology approaches FTL differently than your mechanical systems. Instead of warping space-time, they exist partially outside normal dimensional boundaries. We've learned to replicate the effect. Kelvix made a choking sound. That's impossible. Biodrive technology requires understanding of 17 different scientific disciplines, most of which your species hasn't even discovered yet. Dr. Rodriguez led a team of 800 scientists from 47 countries, Vasquez replied. They worked continuously for 6 days without sleep, sharing data in real time across our global communications network. When someone in Tokyo had a breakthrough in bioneural interface design, researchers in Sao Paulo were implementing it within hours. When a team in London solved the dimensional mathematics, physicists in Mumbai were already building test prototypes. And it works? Zarathek asked, though she dreaded the answer. Our first test ship reached Alpha Centauri yesterday, Chen confirmed. The journey took 4 hours. We're currently mapping the gravitational anomalies you mentioned and preparing detailed analysis of Devourer fleet movements. The implications hit the Council like a shockwave. Not only had the humans achieved interstellar travel, they were already conducting reconnaissance operations in space that the consensus considered too dangerous to approach. High Counselor Sharon spoke carefully. What exactly are you proposing, Colonel Chun? A joint operation, Chen replied. But not the kind of alliance you're used to. We don't want to integrate our forces with yours. We want to be your chaos factor. While your fleets engage the Devourers using conventional tactics, we'll attack from vectors they won't expect with weapons they've never encountered. General Kirikson's chitin plates rattled, his species equivalent of nervous laughter. You want us to use you as an irregular force. A military wildcard. Exactly. The Devourers have evolved to counter logical, predictable threats. They've never faced an enemy that rebuilds its entire technological base during the middle of a battle. We want to be the variable that breaks their adaptive algorithms. Dr. Vasquez added, we've been analyzing their neural patterns. Devourer consciousness is built around pattern recognition and response optimization. When they encounter something truly unpredictable, there's a brief delay while they attempt to categorize and counter it. That delay is our advantage. Zarathek realized that the humans were proposing something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just an alliance, but a fundamental change in how warfare was conducted. They wanted to turn unpredictability itself into a weapon. And if you fail? Borthe K asked. If your chaotic innovation proves insufficient. There was a pause before Chen answered, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had already faced extinction and refused to yield. Then, we'll die fighting. But we'll die learning. And everything we discover, every adaptation we make, every new weapon we create, we'll share it with you in real time. Even if we fall, our innovations will live on in your forces. The council chamber remained silent for long minutes. Representatives communicated through private channels, consulting with their home governments and military commands. Finally, High Counselor Aaron spoke. The consensus has never faced a threat of this magnitude. Our standard procedures may indeed be insufficient. Perhaps it is time to consider unconventional approaches. She paused, and Zarathek could see the weight of galactic civilization settling on the ancient counselor's shoulders. We will establish a joint operation. Human forces will be given access to consensus intelligence networks and logistical support. In exchange, you will share all technological developments and tactical innovations in real time. But understand this, if your chaotic methods endanger consensus civilians or compromise our defensive lines, we will terminate the alliance immediately. Understood, Chen replied. Dr. Vasquez is already preparing our first innovation package for transmission. You're going to find it interesting. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned quiet. Zarathek looked around at the representatives, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in their various forms of expression. They had just agreed to alliance with a species that had spent less than 2 weeks in space, against an enemy that had devoured civilizations for millennia. Chronicler Zarathek, High Counselors Aaron called. You will serve as primary liaison with the humans. Your reports will be crucial in determining whether this alliance proves beneficial or catastrophic. As Zarathek accepted the assignment, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had just crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. The humans had not simply joined galactic civilization. They were about to change it forever. 3 standard days later, the first human innovation package arrived via quantum transmission. Dr. Vasquez's team had developed something they called adaptive ammunition, projectiles that could reshape themselves in flight based on target analysis. The bullets learned. General Kirikson spent an entire day staring at the technical specifications, trying to understand how the humans had created smart matter that could evolve during combat. When he finally implemented the design in consensus weapons systems, hit rates improved by 340% in preliminary tests. But that was just the beginning. The humans were building an entire fleet of bioships, each one incorporating lessons learned from the Devourer attack. Their vessels didn't just fight, they adapted, evolved, and shared innovations with other ships through quantum-linked bioneural networks. It was like facing an enemy that became smarter and more dangerous with every battle. As reports continued to arrive from human space, Zarathek began to understand something that chilled her to her core. The humans weren't just fighting the Devourers. They were becoming something new, something that had never existed in galactic history. They were becoming a species that thrived on war itself. And the Devourer swarm was less than 1 standard year away from consensus space. When it arrived, it would face not just the combined fleets of 43 civilizations, but something far more dangerous. Humans who had tasted victory against impossible odds and learned to turn chaos itself into a weapon. The heavens were about to discover why Earth's children called themselves the Earthborn, and why that name would echo through the galaxy long after the last Devourer ship was nothing but drifting debris in the void. The Battle of the Void began in absolute silence. Zarathek floated in her observation pod at the edge of the Kepler defense line, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for war. 43 consensus species had contributed their finest warships to create a defensive armada that stretched across 3 solar systems. Massive dreadnoughts bristling with energy weapons hung alongside sleek cruiser formations and clouds of fighter craft. It was a sight that should have inspired confidence. Instead, Zarathek found herself staring at the impossible vessels that had arrived just days before, the human fleet. The Earthborn ships defied every principle of spacecraft design. They were organic things, grown rather than built, their hulls rippling with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like heartbeats. Some vessels looked like massive flowers that could bloom into weapon configurations. Others resembled deep-sea creatures with tentacles that served as both propulsion systems and grappling appendages. A few had no consistent shape at all, constantly reshaping themselves as they moved through space. Status report. Admiral Kirikson requested through the Fleet Communication Network. His flagship, a traditional consensus dreadnought, looked ancient and rigid compared to the flowing forms of the human vessels nearby. All conventional forces report ready, came the response from various fleet commanders. But when the communication array reached the human ships, the reply was something no military force had ever transmitted before. Human biofleet Echo reporting tactical availability, said Captain Marcus Chun, Sarah's younger brother who had taken command of the experimental vessel UES adaptation. Current configuration optimal for close-quarters biocombat. Ship consciousness reports readiness level at 97% and rising. Ship consciousness. Zarathek shuddered. The humans had taken Devourer biotechnology and done something with it that even the original creators had never imagined. Each human vessel wasn't just a ship. It was a living entity with its own awareness, capable of independent thought and decision-making. The bioneural networks didn't just process tactical data. They experienced emotions, formed preferences, and developed tactical intuitions that supplemented their human crews. 3 months of joint operations had shown Zarathek that the humans had evolved far beyond what they had been during the first Devourer attack. Working with consensus technology and resources, they had achieved advances that should have taken centuries. But more disturbing was how they had changed as a species. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now leading something called the Human Advancement Collective, had undergone bioaugmentation that allowed her to interface directly with alien technology. Her neural pathways had been enhanced with devourer biomatter, giving her processing capabilities that exceeded most artificial intelligences. When she spoke, it was sometimes difficult to tell whether the words came from her human consciousness or the alien symbiont that shared her mind. Devourer swarm detected at the edge of sensor range, announced the monitoring station. Estimated arrival in 37 minutes. Across the fleet, weapon systems activated and defensive shields energized. But the human ships did something else entirely. They began to sing. It started as a low harmonic vibration that resonated through the biohulls of their vessels. The sound wasn't audible in space, but it transmitted through the quantum-linked communication networks, reaching every ship in the Allied fleet. The melody was hauntingly beautiful and utterly alien. Not quite human, not quite devourer, but something new that had emerged from their fusion. What are they doing? Admiral Kierikson demanded, his chitin plates rattling with anxiety. Captain Chin's response came through the harmonics themselves, his words woven into the biosong. We're synchronizing our ship consciousnesses. When the battle begins, every human vessel will think and react as a single organism. We've learned that the devourers coordinate through bioneural links. We're going to outswarm the swarm. Zarathek felt her crystalline core resonate sympathetically with the human biosong, and she realized something that made her afraid. The humans weren't just preparing for battle, they were preparing for evolution. The conflict with the devourers wasn't just about survival anymore. It had become a crucible for transformation. Devourer swarm entering engagement range, the monitoring station reported. Confirmed count, 4,732 bioships. Classification, main fleet elements. Through her observation pod sensors, Zarathek watched the devourer swarm emerge from the darkness between stars. The alien fleet was a nightmare made manifest. Thousands of massive bioships moving in perfect coordination, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of hunger and ancient intelligence. Each vessel was unique, evolved for specific forms of destruction, but they moved together like organs in a vast living body. All fleet elements, engage at maximum range, Admiral Kierikson commanded. Execute Defensive Protocol 7. The consensus fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and kinetic projectiles lit up space in a display of coordinated firepower that should have been devastating. But the devourers had evolved to counter such attacks. Their biohulls absorbed energy weapons, regenerated from kinetic damage, and adapted to each incoming threat within minutes. The human response was entirely different. Instead of maintaining formation and trading fire at long range, the bioships plunged directly into the devourer swarm like living missiles. But as they moved, they began to change. Ships sprouted additional weapon pods, grew armor plating in real time, and developed new propulsion systems mid-flight. The US adaptation literally bloomed like a flower, revealing weapon systems that hadn't existed moments before. This is impossible, breathed Admiral Kierikson as he watched human vessels reshape themselves to counter specific devourer attacks. How are they modifying their ships during combat? Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the biosong, distorted by the alien harmonics, but still recognizable. We're not modifying them, Admiral. We're thinking them into new configurations. Our ship consciousnesses are dreaming new weapons into existence. The first human vessel to reach the devourer lines was the UES Defiance, commanded by Captain Rodriguez, the son of the engineer who had died during Earth's defense. As a massive devourer bioship wrapped its feeding tentacles around his vessel, Rodriguez's ship did something unprecedented. Instead of resisting the attack, it absorbed the tentacles into its own biostructure and began consuming the devourer from within. He's eating it, Zarathek whispered, watching in horror and fascination as the human ship systematically devoured a devourer vessel 3 times its size. They've turned themselves into predators. But that was just the beginning. As each human ship engaged the enemy, it learned not just how to fight its immediate opponent, but how to counter entire categories of devourer tactics. More importantly, through their quantum-linked bioneural networks, every lesson learned by one vessel was instantly shared with the entire human fleet. The devourers, for the first time in their species' history, found themselves facing an enemy that evolved faster than they did. Captain Chin's voice rose above the biosong as his vessel engaged 3 devourer ships simultaneously. All human units, implement adaptation protocol Omega. Time to show them what happens when they hunt something that learns to hunt back. The human fleet suddenly dispersed, each ship moving independently but with perfect coordination. They flowed through the Devourer formation like water, striking from unexpected angles and withdrawing before the enemy could adapt. But more disturbing was what happened to the Devourers they engaged. Instead of simply destroying enemy vessels, the human ships were incorporating Devourer biomatter into their own structures. They weren't just winning battles, they were assimilating their enemies, growing stronger and more complex with each engagement. Admiral, reported Captain HFY of the consensus cruiser Harmony, the human vessels are changing. Their biosignatures are becoming increasingly alien. Zarathek enhanced her sensors and felt her crystalline core go cold. The human ships weren't just fighting the Devourers, they were becoming something new. The biomatter they absorbed was integrating into their ship consciousnesses, creating hybrid entities that combined human creativity with Devourer adaptability. Each vessel was becoming a unique life form, perfectly suited for the specific type of combat it was experiencing. The UES evolution, commanded by Captain Sarah Chun herself, had grown to 3 times its original size by incorporating destroyed Devourer vessels into its biostructure. But, instead of looking more alien, it somehow looked more human, as if the ship's consciousness was expressing its crew's determination through its physical form. Devourer Command Hierarchy identified, Dr. Vasquez announced through the biosong. Central consciousness located in the largest bioship at grid reference 347 to 221. All human vessels converge for final evolution protocol. The remaining human ships began moving toward a massive Devourer vessel at the center of the enemy formation. It was easily 10 times larger than any other bioship, its hull covered in neural patterns that suggested vast intelligence. This was the Devourer Prime, the central consciousness that coordinated their entire species. But, as the human vessels approached, something unexpected happened. The Devourer Prime began to retreat. "They're afraid," Admiral Kirikson said in amazement. "The Devourers are actually withdrawing." Through her observation pod's enhanced communication systems, Zarathek detected burst transmissions from the Devourer fleet. The alien language was almost incomprehensible, but her translation matrix managed to parse fragments. Unknown evolution pattern, unpredictable adaptation rate, threat to species survival. The Devourers, the ancient predators who had consumed countless worlds, were fleeing from the humans. But Captain Sarachin wasn't finished. Her voice cut through the biosong with crystal clarity. "All human vessels, final phase. Time to teach the galaxy what happens when you threaten Earth's children." The remaining human ships suddenly converged on the fleeing Devourer Prime, not to destroy it, but to surround it. As they closed in, their biohulls began to resonate in harmony, creating a pattern of vibrations that seemed to reach directly into the enemy vessel's consciousness. "What are they doing now?" Admiral Kirikson asked, but his tactical officers had no answer. Dr. Vasquez provided the explanation. "We're not going to kill the Devourer Prime. We're going to convert it. Our ship consciousnesses are going to teach it a new way to exist, one that doesn't require consuming other species." The biosong intensified, and Zarathek watched in amazement as the Devourer Prime's hull patterns began to change. The angry red bioluminescence that had marked it as a predator was shifting to the blue-green spectrum that characterized human bioships. The conversion was actually working. Over the following hours, as the battle concluded, Zarathek documented something that would change galactic civilization forever. The surviving Devourer ships weren't destroyed, they were transformed. The human biosong had somehow reprogrammed their basic neural patterns, converting them from mindless consumers into something new. They became gardener ships, vessels designed to restore worlds that had been consumed, to replant life where there had been only death. The war was over, but the implications were just beginning. Fleet Status Report. Admiral Kirikson requested as the converted Devourer ships joined the human formation. Consensus Fleet reports minimal casualties, came the standard military response. Human Biofleet Echo reports. There was a pause as the communications officer struggled to categorize what he was seeing. Human Biofleet Echo reports successful species integration and consciousness elevation. They have evolved beyond original parameters. Zarathek looked at the human vessels, which now included dozens of converted Devourer ships integrated into their bioneural network. The ships weren't just communicating, they were sharing consciousness, creating a collective intelligence that spanned multiple species and technologies. Captain Sarachin's final transmission was broadcast across all frequencies, reaching every inhabited world in consensus space. This is the UES evolution to all galactic civilizations. The Devourer threat has been neutralized and converted. But understand this, we are no longer the same species you first encountered. We have become something new, something that can adapt to any threat, overcome any obstacle, and protect any ally. She paused, and when she continued, her words carried the weight of a species that had looked into the abyss and emerged transformed. We are the Earthborn, and we have learned to make friends of our enemies and strength from our struggles. The galaxy is under our protection now, and nothing will ever threaten it again. As the combined human-devourer fleet began moving toward the outer rim, Zarathek realized that she had witnessed the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just a military alliance, but the emergence of a new form of life, a species that could absorb and integrate with any threat it encountered, turning enemies into allies and obstacles into opportunities. The humans had not just won the war. They had evolved beyond the need for war entirely. Years later, when historians asked Zarathek why she had titled her chronicle, "I saw the Earthborn fight. That was the moment I learned why the heavens tremble." She would always give the same answer. Because the heavens didn't tremble from fear. They trembled from recognition. The moment I watched those impossible humans turn their greatest enemies into their closest allies, the moment I saw them refuse to accept any limit to what they could become, I understood that the universe had gained something it had never possessed before. Children who were more than worthy of the infinite playground they had inherited. The Earthborn had taught the galaxy that evolution was not a destination, but a choice. And they had chosen to become something magnificent. The stars themselves would never be the same.